Right from its inception, the Vision Gran Turismo program was a controversial one. Those of us like myself, and I'm sure many of you, were really stoked for the unfettered creativity which the lack of a rulebook would allow manufacturers to have. Chaparral, Dodge with the Tomahawk, and various others really took advantage of that. And of course, the one which I regret not coming to the game the most, the Bertoni, which looked kind of like the Batman tumbler. Others though feel more like, well, let's say it as it is, kind of a cheap marketing gimmick. The Beamer, for example, just looks like an M2 competition. The Daihatsu, probably most notably, they just don't feel like they had that much effort put into them, as much as we would like to love them more. This one is a car that I was really looking forward to. I didn't have expectations that it would be the best thing in the game, but being a Lamborghini really affords the car an innate level of insanity. Some kind of ridiculous hybrid V12 monster power plant in an ultra lightweight, almost prototype style frame. It could have essentially been like the Lamborghini Le Mans car that we never had. Countach QVX notwithstanding. Now this particular one does have good numbers. The point level is very high, 820. The power though is not that crazy, similar to what some of the road cars would have at 774. Now I will say the weight is very good. It only weighs 819 kilos, so the horsepower per ton level is fantastic. And certainly on paper at least it justifies having a high point. But then as you can see from the performance here at Lasat, it's not as quick as you might expect. And being a Vision GT, unfortunately it does lack a lot of the tuning freedom which normal cars and even race cars in the game do have. You can do a couple of things to them, but not really that much. Another curiosity, and I'm not sure why they did this with the Lamborghini, is as standard it comes with soft tyres rather than racing tyres. I don't really understand why they made that choice, but it very clearly has that kind of endurance prototype meets closed wheel formula car approach, which is very similar to the McLaren, and you could say that kind of started way back with the Nike 1 in Gran Turismo 4, which wasn't even a Vision GT car, but kind of was at the same time. But in terms of how this car performs, it really is a mixed bag, and I would say you need to weigh up very heavily if you believe it's going to be worth dropping 1 million credits on this thing for yourself personally, based on the advice I'm going to give here. Because on the one hand, it's very fast. This is a very fast car. Great acceleration throughout its entire range, certainly quick off the line. Technically, it has a colossal amount of grip, and the top speed is more than good enough to win at its point level, at least against most cars. However, the steering, in a similar way to some others like the Subaru, which is pretty much always my example of a less than stellar handling Vision GT car, is very odd. See, this car is extremely unstable under braking. When you dive into a corner, which is exactly what you'd want to be able to do with a car like this, the back end almost feels like it wants to overtake the front, causing it to kind of jackknife. That is not the kind of steering and grip level that you want to be happening from something with this kind of performance, because it just completely stunts its ability, because you have to then approach a corner much more slowly and more calmly, which kind of negates the whole point of having a car that fast in the first place. Then, when you floor it and unleash that power and torque explosively out of a corner, it goes completely the opposite. Instead of jackknifing and oversteering under braking, it then becomes extremely heavy on the front end and super cumbersome, almost as if it were an LM Nismo with front-wheel drive. Now, somewhere between those is the sweet spot. And the key to this car, at least driving it effectively in my opinion, is to allow the car to kind of coast through corners. Give it maybe half throttle, about 70% at most through a corner, feathering it on and off a little bit as necessary, and then really, unfortunately, much like many of these cars, and I believe I actually said this in the Jaguar SV review as well, you kind of need to treat this thing like a missile. You only fully open it up when you're pointing pretty much exactly in the direction you want to go, because if you open it up before that, especially mid-corner, you just get rampant understeer and it will go straight off the outside of the track because of how obscenely heavy the steering becomes. It actually makes it a really weird car to work with. It's almost like it's good and bad at the same time, because academically it is very fast and you can wipe the floor with a lot of AI cars, for example, in career mode with it. I've used it to win races, it can be used technically.
but at the same time it's not really a pleasure to work with. There's nothing particularly fun about the car, but at the same time, ironically for a Lambo, and ironically for a car that looks like this, it's not really that crazy. There's nothing special about this car, apart from its looks, and I think that's a real shame, because they could have gone truly crazy with a car like this. It feels almost like taking an Aventador SV engine and just dropping it into a pared down, futuristic looking endurance prototype. Now on paper, that's a great idea, and in reality that would give you something like an Aston Lola LMP car. Big V12 in a closed-top prototype frame. Gorgeous car, my favourite Le Mans prototype of all time. Here though, it's almost like how not to do that, and it ends up with awkward handling, weird acceleration, strangely unstable manners under heavy braking, so as if it weren't obvious enough, this really is a car that I think you need to weigh up, because all of this is going to happen if you buy it and if you try it. You have to be very smooth, very measured, which feels kind of pointless when you've got this much performance potential. There's nothing Tomahawk or Chaparral-esque about its idea, something to really capture your imagination. Honestly, unfortunately, it kind of reminds me of what I don't like about Lamborghini's road cars, where everything just kind of feels like an evolution of the Aventador. Centenario, Veneno, SV, SVJ, they're just multiple variants of this same underlying shape. This almost just feels like another version of that, and that's really not what I want from a million credit, super creative concept car. I think that's kind of a shame. But overall, that's it for my thoughts. But what about for you? If you've already purchased this car or tried it in the game, tell me your thoughts. Do you think it's better than I'm giving it credit for? Do you find it more useful, maybe for a specific event or a type of event, maybe if you down-tune the power, etc.? Because you could feasibly get it below 800 points, so it could be useful for sure. Tell me your thoughts. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think it's one of your preferred or less preferred Vision GTs? And of course, check out my other reviews that are already on the channel, such as the Jag, which I mentioned. And until next time, I'll see you then with more. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.